Chives are a plant that is suitable for most gardens. They're easy to grow, they're easy to use, and they're very easy to propagate. Join me today as I show you how I divide my chives to spread throughout my garden. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and this is Lika. She's helping me today as I divide my chives and put them in a number of different places. Right now, I only have chives in 2 spots, in this pot and in that container over there. A few years ago, I started these chives and the ones in the pot from seed. I love growing chives. They're so easy to use in so many ways in the kitchen. But for me, in this garden, I really like the way they look when they begin to flower. These plants, when they flower, attract bees and just add a wonderful spark of color in my garden. So I want to recreate that throughout the garden, to get that beautiful purple flower as a perennial plant, not just something to use in the kitchen. When I started these chives from seed, I was still in the process of building this garden. So I knew I wanted this plant, but I wasn't sure where I wanted it. So I put one clump in this bed. The primary plant in this bed is horseradish. Now these chives are starting to infringe on the horseradish, and I have a better idea of where I want these plants now that my garden is more built out. So it's an ideal time to dig these up and divide them and move them to other areas. The horseradish is just waking up. This is early spring. The chives are already growing pretty well. This is the time of year that it's best to divide them, when they're actively growing in early spring, so that we can put them in other spots and give them a full season to grow. I'll begin by digging up this entire clump. So I'll basically just cut a ring around this clump to try to get down to the depth of the roots, and then gradually pry out this entire clump. It's loosening pretty well. Should be able to get down here. And I've got the roots and the plants, and now these are ready to divide. This may look like it is one big plant, but as we look closer at this, see, it's actually many individual plants. A clump this size can give us dozens, maybe even hundreds of plants that we can move to other areas. Each of these group of leaves is an individual plant. So we have a plant here, and if we just peel off from the outside edges, we continue to find lots more individual plants. I can plant each of these as an individual plant, and in a few years, I can expect it to give me a clump about this size. This is how I started. From seed, I grew individual plants and allowed them to clump. Now, I don't need this many chive plants. So another option, rather than peeling from the outside, is to actually break this apart into clumps. And so just by pulling a clump apart, this is what I'm looking to plant in other areas. I've got multiple plants here, which will give me a much sturdier, stronger appearance of flowers when I transplant them. If the clump is particularly dense, and if you wait a long time to do this, you may have so many roots and so many plants that it isn't as easy to pull apart. No problem. Just get your trowel and stick the trowel into the clump. Now, using the trowel, you can pry apart the clump into smaller clumps. And depending on how you want to transplant these, you can continue breaking it into big size clumps or smaller size clumps, or separating into individual plants. I'll do the same thing with the clump in this pot. Now you want to divide your chives periodically. This is filling this pot, which means that all of these individual plants are competing with each other for the small amount of soil and nutrients that are inside this pot. So I'll pull this whole thing out, divide it into smaller pieces, add some more soil with amendments, and then put a much smaller clump into this pot and expect it to fill out in a few years. Most of these plants, however, are going around my garden as landscape plants for some of the benefits that chives might offer. Now, there is some research that shows that chives can deter some aphids. And these rose bushes here might be susceptible to aphids. So not only is this a beautiful plant, and those purple flowers will accent all of my rose bushes, but there is that chance that by having chives near my roses, I can deter some of the potential aphid problems. These are new beds with no plants in them other than the rose bushes at the end. So it's a perfect spot to put something new, like the chives. So I'll go ahead and take a nice, pretty big clump. I'll divide this in half again. I'll put this on the other side. And I'll dig a hole, trying to get down to the same depth as these roots. That's a weed of some type, doesn't need to be there. And so I'll put the clump in the hole a little bit deeper, and then fill it back in with the soil. It's okay to bury the small bulbs at the base of the plant. In fact, that's what we want to do. So we'll bury it at the same level that it was growing before, with all the green above the soil and the mulch and the roots and the small bulbs below the surface. Next, I'll give these plants a haircut. Now, anytime you transplant a plant that is alive, it's going to have transplant shock. I've probably damaged some of the roots as well. So all of this foliage, all of these leaves that are growing big and tall, might not have enough support from the root system underneath. So I'll cut these about in half so that I don't put as much stress on the overall root system. Now, you can definitely use these in your kitchen. In fact, that's what I'm going to do, is take them in, maybe have a baked potato tonight with some chives. I love that. You can go ahead and do the haircut before you transplant. The idea is just to remove about half of the foliage for small plants like this to give them a better start in the soil after transplanting. Anytime you transplant, you also want to water the plant right away. So I'll give this area a good soaking so that the soil rests around the roots that are in their new home. And that should do for a couple days. This plant's ready to go. Time to get other plants in the ground. Another thing to do to help reduce some of the problems with transplant shock is to do this on a cool, overcast day. Now, when I began, it was cool and overcast, but the sun is trying to peek out. So it's time to get to work and get the last of these plants in the ground. And I'll spread them all over, get that wonderful burst of color. And chives have a pretty long bloom season, so they really do great as a landscape perennial. And then, of course, you can harvest them, and I plan to do that. I'll dehydrate a lot of these chives that I don't use fresh, and I'll have them available for dinner, lunch, dips, whatever I decide to do for many months to come. If you want to see more about some of the propagation that I've done, watch one of these videos next. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.